Okay.
Perfect. And then also, I will be sending out the presentation slides afterwards to the Climate Reality team. So those will be made available just for that first piece that wasn't recorded.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. So just to go on here, I think I'm coming up on climate adaptation. So the recommendations also integrate adaptation and resilience strategies. This is the adaptation element in the term CAAP. And that helps us understand where and how Irvine is vulnerable to climate change, which we're already experiencing. You know, we've already set into motion some of these things. We really need to think about actions that will help increase our resilience to these climate hazards and prepare us for the future as we experience a change in climate. And throughout this entire process, we'll be engaging the community. So this presentation right now is part of the effort to engage the Irvine community in the process of developing the CAAP. It's critical to make sure that this plan is reflective of the Irvine community and ensure that we choose strategies for reducing our emissions and adapting to climate change that are a good fit for Irvine and its residents. We also want to make sure that as many Irvine residents know about the CAAP as possible so that they can get involved and help take steps towards a climate smart future and provide their feedback. So tonight we'll be giving out our emails. We're happy to take this sort of roadshow presentation and feedback opportunity on the road. So after this presentation, if any of you are involved in additional groups like faith-based groups or volunteer organizations, art-based groups, we're happy to meet and again, really provide space for the conversation and to get feedback. And then lastly, a CAAP provides an implementation plan as the final step. So once we've finished developing the CAAP, it's time to start taking steps to implement the recommendations. This will happen both within the city in our actions and also within the community. Successful implementation will rely on the collaboration between the city, its residents, businesses, universities, and all of our stakeholders. Next slide. Great. So yeah, just kind of wrapping up this concept of a climate action and adaptation plan. It creates a framework to meet the carbon neutrality goal that we've set or to aspire towards it, and also just to become a more sustainable and resilient city in the face of impacts from climate change. So to sort of review, you know, both action and adaptation are key to making a climate smart future a reality. So climate action, meaning taking the steps to reduce the causes of climate change, such as greenhouse gas emissions, and climate adaptation being preparing for the impacts of climate change that we're already experiencing and perhaps anticipating, and reducing the negative effects of these impacts. So now I'm going to jump into the greenhouse gas inventory that I just referenced, which has been our first step in developing the CAAP. So the community inventory shown here takes a look at where emissions are coming from in our community-wide activities. So everything that's happening within the city of Irvine. You can see in this chart here that collectively on-road transportation and building energy account for approximately 84% of all emissions in 2019. I'd also like to note that this data is based off 2019 because 2020 and 2021 were abnormal years with the pandemic. So the remaining 16% of emissions outside of transportation and building energy are attributed to solid waste, which is 7%, wastewater treatment, 6%, off-road vehicles and equipment, which includes equipment such as lawnmowers and leaf blowers, is about 3%, and then water supply, less than 1%. Next slide, please. So now I'll be breaking down each of these sectors a little bit more to get a little more visibility into how it breaks down. So here you can see on-road transportation and that breakdown. So again, transportation accounts for 51% of the entire community emissions in Irvine, but within that, 95% is coming from cars and light duty trucks. So that's everyday vehicles that we all drive. And then you'll see the smaller slice there, 5% is from medium and heavy duty trucking in our community. In the next slide here, we have building emissions. which represented 33% of Irvine's total community emissions. So building emissions can be broken down even further by non-residential, which would be commercial buildings, and then residential buildings. Non-residential commercial buildings actually account for the larger portion of building emissions at 21%. And more than half of non-residential emissions come from the electricity supply, with 33% coming from natural gas. Residential buildings, accounting for 12% of building emissions, have a swapped emissions profile, with natural gas actually being the majority of emissions at 64% and electricity at 36%. This is an important time to note that this past year, the city launched a community choice energy program called the Orange County Power Authority, which provides the option for residents and businesses in Irvine to receive 100% renewable energy. In fact, the city council last year voted to default the entire community to the 100% renewable option, although there is an option to downgrade the renewable amount or to opt out completely. However, this does change the scenario for electricity related emissions and highlights how participating in a CCA's 100% renewable option is one of the fastest and most affordable ways to eliminate a huge portion of emissions from our buildings without dealing with the infrastructure related costs or challenges with retrofitting out natural gas, for example. And then we'll move on. So finally, we have our smallest piece of the pie that represents a number of smaller emissions producing activities, such as the off-road equipment, wastewater treatment, and you can see the breakdown of these activities as it relates to their 17% contribution to the total community emissions. And so now I'll jump on to the forecasts. So our consultant helped us develop a 2030 forecast for the city of Irvine that shows where we would be if we didn't take any action as a city beyond what the federal, state, and regional standards will require. There are a number of policies that will be put into place by 2030, such as the state building code, the state's renewable portfolio standard for electricity generation, and other policies such as the ban of the sale of gas-powered vehicles that will ultimately reduce emissions. And as you can see, there is a reduction specifically in the key areas of transportation, which I believe is blue, and buildings, which is red. But we want to aim beyond that and reduce our emissions deeper and much faster than this business as usual model. And so these forecasts also will expand as the CAAP targets and measures are solidified, and we'll be able to see just how much reductions we can get by what year and with what measures. So that's something that's forthcoming in this CAAP development process as we kind of wrestle with the targets and the measures. Right now, we're still between the stages 1 and 2 of the greenhouse gas inventory and the target setting. And so before we move on, that was a lot of statistics, a lot of information to process. I'd like to just offer the opportunity for Sona and myself to answer any questions if anything has come up in terms of this information.
I have questions.
Yeah, great. I was going to say, if you want to do it verbally, that's fine too.
Anyway, you guys like, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Celine. Craig in Costa Mesa. Thank you for this presentation. In terms of CAAPs, I guess it's just learning it's CAAP for Climate Action and Adaptation Plan.
Yeah, so I think the previous iterations when CAAPs first started coming around were usually CAP, just Climate Action Plan, meaning just taking the steps to reduce emissions. But now, especially now in 2022, 2023, that adaptation piece is becoming so much more prominent because we're seeing the effects of climate change and the impacts faster than we ever, I wouldn't say dreamed, it's more of a nightmare, right? Faster than we thought would happen. So that's becoming a critical piece now, is not just the action to reduce, but the adaptation to what's already happening.
And is there a encouragement from the state for each city to have a CAAP, and how many cities already have them or are working on them?
There is, there's definitely an encouragement from the state. I believe it's the Office of Planning and Research that has guidance for city CAAPs. although it's not, to my knowledge, required at this point to develop one. And yes, many cities, I wouldn't know the number off the top of my head, but it's common practice, I think, at this point.
And just give me a city. What's
yeah.
a city that has a good one?
City of San Diego actually has the first CAAP that I think it was binding legally. Linda, you could probably speak to that. I think City of San Diego is a really great CAAP.
I
And then,
think
of course,
now,
yeah.
I'm sorry, the county of San Diego has like 9 that are legally binding now, but we're a little behind that in Orange County.
All right.
So there's
Thank
some
you,
larger agencies that have them, like the City of Long Beach, the County of Los Angeles, and then smaller cities within the Los Angeles region have been doing climate planning for a little bit longer than we have in Orange County. So this comprehensive effort has kicked off here. But I think for cities that are interested in implementing CAAPs, it can be a resource intensive process that cities may not be able to take on. But there's quite a bit of funding coming down now, like the Strategic Growth Council, OPR, the governor's office that Celine mentioned. They also have resources that instead of doing a full-blown CAAP, you can refer to the scoping plan. And there's a section in there, it's called the local action section, that really just hones in on here are the measures for buildings, here are the measures for transportations. And these are the key things that, with or without a CAAP, these are the measures we know that cities should be implementing in an effort to reduce emissions and, build out the infrastructure we need to for a climate resilient future. So there's resources out there without having to go through the longer process of a climate planning effort.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. See a few hands up. I think Tim, you may have emailed our group earlier. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Sofa. And Selena, thank you for the presentation. So I have a question about the 2030 carbon neutrality or net zero target. I'm wondering, like, beyond the long-term target, do we have any short-term target, like by 2025 or 2027 or something like that? Do we want to achieve like 50%, 60% reduction, or we only have the long-term target for now?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Sona, sorry.
Yeah, I can speak to the target. So the target for 2030, it is the city's ambitious goals. As Celine mentioned, it's our moonshot goal to reach carbon neutrality. We haven't yet set the interim targets, but that is part of the implementation planning phase of the climate plan, is to look at, take the status of where we are and then set up these milestone targets in the interim to show where we can get mid-cycle, 2030, 2035, and then 2045 also to align with where the state is at. If full carbon neutrality by 2030 is definitely a moonshot to try and reach that. So wanting to be as ambitious as we can, and then also realistic to align with the other targets in the region.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, of course. Let's see, Hoyan. Oh, Hoyan, you're up. Oh, there you go.
Well, we have wonderful staff. That's all I can say to start with. And I think you guys probably can use a lot of help in Orange County with this kind of mindset. So I encourage everyone to join us to support our staff. So I actually have 2 questions. So I'll throw the easy one out first. Celine, thank you so much for the presentation, the pie charts, the bar charts. So just give people an idea. So I said this several times. I don't feel like those transportation workshops were well attended. There's like, sometimes just 2 of us there. I think this is probably pretty hard. I'm actually kind of concerned because it's 51% of our GHG. And on the housing side, building side, electrification side, that's our 33%. And with this CCE 100% renewable default, hopefully that will drop the number down rather quickly, quote quickly, that kind of thing. So I feel like the city is having, of course, the politicians are pushed by constituents. So I feel like, the focus on energy is like, just a little bit over there. We got last night and last week and previously, things like that. So I hope folks can help here. The group here can help us to push for more transportation side of the GHG reduction. So I want to know from staff what we can do on that. And lastly, a little question. I'm not sure if you want to reply, tell us now, is that at the last Green Ribbon Committee meeting, Ascent said, so they kind of recommended non-CEQA qualified CAP. So, you know, boy, I didn't sleep again that night. So what's the status on that? Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So for the Green Committee meeting, our next meeting is February, oh goodness, I think it's February 8th. It'll be that second Wednesday in February, and that's where we'll be discussing the CEQA options for the CAP. And so there were a few kind of pathways for that also, like looking at the CEQA qualified portion. And so when you're considering the measures, and I think this will help when we get into the next piece of the presentation, to have an understanding of an overview of what some of the measures are. And that's what would be included in the CEQA qualified CAP. And what that means is there's the California Environmental Quality Act, and you have to show justification for the measures that these are implementable. They have a financial payback, what the restrictions are around it, to show that these are measures that can actually be implemented in a city by those that would be impacted by it. So by the builders, developers, et cetera. For the more ambitious measures where we might be talking more about behavior change or voluntary measures, incentives, things like that, that aren't quantifiable, those measures wouldn't be included in what's called the CEQA qualified CAP. So we were looking at, how many of those measures will we have? We don't know that yet for our climate plan, but can we have a hybrid option where we have this legally binding portion, and then we have our more ambitious targets? So trying to make a legally binding CAP by 2030 is most likely not feasible for a city like Irvine, as we won't be able to force the types of cars people drive through our city every day, and measures like that, where we've got a significant amount of transit through this city. And Hoyen, I know you were asking about the transportation measure. Our daytime population in Irvine doubles during the day, so we're nearly 300,000 or over 300,000 residents right now in Irvine. Nearly that many come driving through the city to work here, and so for a city like Irvine to be able to enforce that type of measures, probably not likely. So we're looking at what other options for the CAP will be in place. So hopefully that helps on that part.
And just another note there. And by the way, Hoyen, thank you so much for your kind words. Really appreciate that and all of your support at so many meetings. But from like a democratic process perspective too, there is a transportation commission that holds regular meetings that is all things transportation. And I know there's a couple of presentations coming up, I think, about the active transportation plan, if that hasn't taken place already. So there's definitely a few things happening in that space. And there is a commission that takes place at the city that is a public hearing as well. So another opportunity to get engaged and involved. Thank you.
I'm just going to say, I see Oscar, you have your hand up, and Danny, so I want to get to the other questions. But I also want to say this is why county advocacy is so important too, because some of the transportation problems aren't going to be solved at the city level. They have a lot to do with, our transportation authority or Orange County Transit Authority and other things. And we have to work together. So another reason why we invited people here. So a lot of cities work together and the county works together. So that's an important piece of this. Oscar, do you want to go?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having this. I appreciate it. My name is Oscar Rodriguez. I'm a planning commissioner with the city of Huntington Beach, and I'm also a liaison to the Environmental and Sustainability Board here. So my question is, what is the city doing to, and this is a question that I always try to keep in mind when we're trying to dealing with any type of policy, is efforts to look at low-income communities, and also if our efforts in policymaking are affecting low-income communities to begin with. So, it's one thing to have some type of policy implemented, but then also if you're raising the price of X, Y, and Z, right? And how is that going to affect our local economy and our family's economy? So it's something just to consider, because that's what we're looking at the city of HB. Right, it's it's awesome, it's great, but also is it sustainable for everyone in the city? So just something to think about. And if the city has thought about that, what are you currently doing for that?
Yeah, that's an important factor. And I think a big piece of this is we want to do this with equity in mind, so that we have that lens of equity through all of the policy making that we have and the discussions and the decisions that will come forward. An example of this is for the energy policy. So for the work with Orange County Power Authority, low-income residents will still have protected rates with their participation in the program, and wanting to make the same offering available, but not having that cost impact, I know is important to a lot of the council members as well. So this discussion came up, last night, even when we were looking at the building electrification policy and thinking about the impacts that requiring all electric construction and all electric buildings will have on renters, tenants, or low-income communities. So that mindset is there to be able to look for and identify some of the alternatives and solutions to see what we can put in place.
I want to just mention quickly too, that there's such an opportunity with these kind of plans to actually help low income beyond, it's not just requiring electrification, it's helping through energy efficiency policies, so that we're building that whole portion of education and helping landlords that have multi-unit, multiple units, with being able to adopt energy efficiency that actually saves tons of money during time of use rates, and when people are just getting their electricity bills are doubling. So there's this great opportunity, if you do it right, to help low income lower their bills from what they are now significantly. So, and there's best practices all over. I've just talked to somebody on the phone in Portland they're doing amazing things. So.
That's such a great point, Linda. I was going to say that, and you just said it perfectly, but I think also trying to view through the lens of opportunity for different disadvantaged segments of the population in terms of what climate policies can actually protect them. And I think there's so much nuance in disadvantaged. And it's so particular to each city. For example, through our vulnerability assessment in the local hazard mitigation plan, we're seeing that Irvine has its own set of disadvantaged populations that look different than other cities. For example, seniors are more vulnerable in certain ways than other populations. And so how might active transportation be beneficial in the event of an emergency, or even in their everyday life, which also is a climate benefit. It's a co-benefit. And a protection and an opportunity for that community, or resiliency when we're looking at local distributed energy resources with solar and energy storage, of also protecting those who might be medically vulnerable, or who really can't deal with the power going out, which is something that we're seeing more. So,
right,
it's definitely a challenge.
Which is why the programs in community choice agencies are so important, because, for instance, sometimes you can't put solar on roofs or even take advantage of the benefits of California if the roofs aren't ready, because that's not covered. But I know Peninsula Clean Energy and other CCAs would fix those roofs so that these multi-family units would then be able to get the solar, which would benefit every resident. So sometimes you can use that revenue to help that process along.
And last thing I'll just say for that comment by Oscar, and definitely want to move on to other questions, and we have an activity as well, but so much of this billion-dollar state funding that's coming down, not even counting the federal, but particularly the state, is allocated for disadvantaged communities and low-income communities. So if you have those segments of your population within the city, huge opportunities to have, measures go through that end up being cost effective that might not otherwise be in all reality, but with this funding, it's making it possible. So it's up for grabs. Yeah.
I will drop a link for that too, Oscar, and for other city reps. We partnered with OC Go Solar on our Solarize program, but they're also a proponent of one of the other state initiatives for solar for affordable housing. It's called the SOMA program. So not SONA like me, but we're pretty close. So I'll put the link in there, because that is another area, like Celine said, there's money up for grabs, and we're told year after year, the money just sits there. It's not being used. And so we really do want to get the information out, especially for affordable communities, affordable housing communities that would really benefit from it. And OC Go Solar can help with that too. So we'll drop that in there.
So Danny, you have your hand up for a question, and then I know, Irvine, you want to go to your next step. So do you want to ask your question?
There's a question in the chat from Kelsey. I just want to read that. The proportion of emissions on transportation versus buildings seems reversed from global proportions. Transportation is higher in Irvine than other areas. Do you have a hypothesis as to why? Are more people driving here, or are building emissions lower due to a cleaner grid?
Actually, they align with the state. So if you look at the state profile as well, transportation emissions are the higher proportion when you're comparing all the sectors. And that probably does go back to the car culture we have here in California, and not having as accessible or as frequent of a transit system. So there's, I'm sure, many other transportation wonks on here that might have some other theories as to why that's so high. But I think that would be one of the reasons, if you're looking at global cities where active transportation and public transit, mass transit is second nature in other cities around the world. We unfortunately don't have that system here. So in Irvine, we're looking at some other options for smaller, micro transit types of programs. The shuttle, we have iShuttle, trying to reconfigure what OCTA service is. Other cities are doing this as well. I think Huntington has an on-demand kind of smaller shuttle service. Long Beach is piloting one now, and they're doing those with small electric vehicles, so electric golf cart type vehicles for on-demand. So that might work if you have areas that are concentrated points of interest in your community where there's a lot of congestion, a lot of traffic, maybe not enough parking. That might be a solution to get people out of their cars and into a more shared type of vehicle. So we're looking for opportunities like that. Let's see. Oh, I saw a hand pop up, Julie.
Hi, I know we need to move on because you have more to cover, but I had a question about the last slide. I just wanted to point out that looking at the sort of, and maybe you can pull it up again, the 2019 versus 2030 percentages in the different categories. And you may have covered this and I didn't catch it. But it seemed like the biggest percentage change that you envision in the future is in the residential building category. And if you could explain the rationale, I guess, or, is that because residential is mostly coming from gas currently, and you envision that going, to electric power sources that are renewable, or why, when the other categories seem to be the same percentage, right? 51% is the on-road transportation and so on. Why is the biggest change in the residential building category? Thank you.
Yeah, that, and Celine might want to chime in on this one. This is, I believe the bulk of that is due to the California Building Code. So the new building code that went into effect this year, and will have those effects running through the rest of the decade there, are requiring all or electric ready type of construction, as far as a lot more energy efficient construction than we've seen in the past. So I think that for residential in particular, will have a big impact there. And then the other measures like our OCPA, the default to 100% renewable electricity, that will also have an impact on our energy emissions from buildings. There might be a few other factors in there, but Celine might have more on that.
Yeah, and I think overall, I mentioned this earlier, but California passed SB 100, which is the renewable portfolio standard, which gets the state to 100% renewable energy by 2045, phasing in higher levels of renewables over the years. So I'm sure that, and I think I remember seeing in the report too, that also is included as a factor, as you saw in the buildings category, that electricity still does represent a decent amount of the chunk of the emissions, but as the grid gets greener, so to speak, that by 100% renewable by 2040 in particular, and this slide being 2030, which is close to that date, that does eat into those emissions. Thanks for the question, Julie. Okay, I think for the sake of time, I'm going to move along. Yes, thank you all for your questions. Also, I will be dropping our environmental programs email into the chat in just a second to keep the conversation going. Please email. That's not going to go into some like vortex somewhere. It just helps us kind of filter the question to who on our team is best to answer it. If you have solid waste questions, if it's energy, it's me. There's, but we will get your question answered. Don't worry. So use the email. But now
they do. They get back to you. They do.
We try our best. So now I'd like to introduce our Civic Spark Fellow, Lauren Fleming, who is leading our climate action community engagement with the city. She'll be leading today's interactive feedback activities. And this section is very important to us. We don't just want to present, although it is important to have the ability to share the city's progress and answer these questions. But most importantly, we want to hear from you. So we have 2 engagement activities today, one being a visioning session and the other is a community survey that's sort of a take-home project. But I want to preface this by stating that all feedback, whether it be this visioning board, the survey, questions sent to us or asked, it's all being compiled and quantified for the development of our CAAP. So we'll be pulling out trends, noting community priorities, especially by stakeholder group. And this is really critical to be able for us to provide direction to our elected officials and for the development of the CAAP overall. So we really appreciate your feedback, and I know the time that it takes to give feedback. So please know it's going to good use. So now I will turn it over to Lauren for the activity.
Thank you for that introduction, Celine. And hello, everyone. I'll be guiding you all through the interactive activity tonight. So as you can see on the screen, you will need your phone or computer for this. You can scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter the code on the screen. And I will allow a few minutes for everyone to join. And if you're joining, just go ahead and sit tight before putting anything in. But essentially, we'll have 3 open questions. They are related to Irvine's climate challenges, Irvine's climate strengths, and your vision for a climate smart future. These answers will be made into a word cloud, as you might be starting to see. And you can submit as many responses as you'd like. Feel free to submit a word, a phrase, or a sentence, and I'll leave each slide up for a couple of minutes to give people time to put in what they like.
Just to make sure, can everyone who's participating, if anyone has any issues, let us know, but hopefully I can see the words starting to bubble up. So if anyone has any problems, just let us know.
Yeah, see the transportation and traffic issues resonated with folks. Yeah.
All right, we still have transportation up as the biggest one.
When we see your notes, Scott, that you're driving, you might be stuck in traffic right now too. If
Yeah.
you're in the car.
Okay, I'll leave it up for a little bit more. If you have anything that you want to say, please go ahead. Okay, so I see transportation, traffic, misinformation, impacts on open spaces, heat, solar adoption, commuters, drought, lots of great stuff here. Let's see, for the sake of time, I might move on to the next one. Is that all right with everyone? Okay. Cool. So the next one should be able to, next question should pop up on your screen, is what is the city of Irvine's biggest strength in addressing the climate crisis? Youth, awesome. Yeah, our youth are very involved, which is great. Commitment, sunshine. We love Irvine sunshine. Community engagement, educated population. Right, so seeing CAAP pop up a lot, which is wonderful. Yeah, we're very excited to keep this developing and implement a really ambitious and really ambitious CAAP that can serve as a vision for the rest of Orange County, community choice energy, which is a great way, as Celine mentioned earlier, to decarbonize our energy in the city, youth, city council, educated population, and community engagement. Yeah, really awesome stuff. And I'm gonna go move on to the last one, if that's okay with everyone. Which is, what is your vision for a climate smart Irvine? And for this one, you can think about what you'd like Irvine to look like in 2030. What will be the greatest thing about Irvine's sustainability or climate action at that point?
Lauren, I'm noticing that the screen on my phone is different than the screen on my computer. I guess it just updates at different times.
Did you only just get the update for the third question?
No, it just, when I look at the word map, they're in different
it looks
places, and I have like 10 or 12 on the screen. I'm like, oh, there's a lot more on the computer.
Yeah. The word clouds, it's compiling everyone's responses. So yeah.
I guess the phone screen has limited. So.
What a wonderful tool.
On your phone.
This is an incredible tool.
Yeah, it's great for being able, I'm glad we get to see everyone's responses at once, and getting lots of great and different responses here, which is amazing. CCE is a big one. Engaged community, green grid, lots of solar, individuals taking action, clean air and water, innovative public transport. Yeah, really great and ambitious visions that everyone has, and I'm excited to see it. So I'll leave this up for just a little bit longer, and then I'll exit out of this activity and show you all the next portion of the feedback. Okay. Just a few more seconds if you want to add anything else. Awesome. pause that sharing. Or here, I'll just stop sharing now. And thank you all for participating in that. We saw a lot of great themes there, as we saw. If anyone has any thoughts or conversation ideas related to these topics that you would want to bring up now, we would love to hear from you. So I'll leave a moment open if anyone wants to talk about anything they saw or mention something that they didn't get to put in the word cloud. Any thoughts that anyone has?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
I saw a global leader go on there and get a little bigger. That just is always on my mind, that if we fix something locally, but it's a global problem, and so often, you know, that's one of the pushbacks, like, oh, we shouldn't do anything because China and India aren't, which isn't true. They're doing a lot. So, so just that idea of, I think Irvine is really stepping out to be a leader in Orange County, but then a leader in the whole state is one of the cool cities. And then I think that inspires me to think how this could be a model to cities across the country. Can you speak to that?
I think absolutely this can be a model. I think that's what we're here for. You know, we can do this for Irvine, but, you know, we're not on an island, and we want to interact with our neighboring cities, with our other cities that aren't neighbors, because we learn a lot from the other communities as well. Irvine is a member of Green Cities California, and so these are some of the leading cities up and down the state that are really at the forefront of climate action and climate planning, and they are models for us to learn about building electrification, about fleet electrification, distributed energy resources, all of the things that we would like to implement and see replicated here in Irvine. There's an example for us to learn from, you know, from another agency that's working on this. So I think that shared leadership model is something we want to be able to provide for others here. And so we in Irvine are fortunate to have the resources. You know, we've got a great staff team here. I know I'm biased, but I think they're the best staff team that's working on climate action here. And this engaged community that each of you are a part of. We have those ingredients in place, and now really some strong political will to move forward on climate action, which I think cities that have that those are the key pieces that you do need to move forward. And, you know, as we know this, and in climate reality, you all especially know this, you know, time is not something, you know, a luxury that we have to keep waiting to take action and put policies in place. So we have that kind of moving us forward to try and move quickly and be able to, you know, take some action now. And Irvine's in a unique position because the city is growing. We're one of the fastest growing cities in the country, not even just in the region, but in the country. So for a city to want to try and take on initiatives like this while you're still developing is really difficult. And it's been a challenge, I think, to structure how we even start talking about the policies and then getting them to this stage. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to do this. And if the others in other cities, you can still help us along with this effort by supporting the effort here, and then doing the same in your communities, because it helps Irvine too to know that, you know, we're not the only city out there doing it. I think there is safety in numbers sometimes, especially for decision makers to know that we're not alone trying to implement and solve this problem by ourselves, because we know that we won't be able to solve it by ourselves. The climate challenge is something that needs all of us to act together.
Can I just say that one of the things I really appreciate, and I think, Rhonda, are you still here? We had Rhonda Bolton from Huntington Beach, and Oscar came from the Planning Commission. And I just want to thank those of you who got emails and invited your city councils. Susan, I know you invited Newport, and Craig, you invited Costa Mesa, and I invited the county. Because we can't do this alone, and our belief that Irvine you've been bent over backwards and been more than willing to share lots that you've learned, so that our other cities don't have to reinvent the wheel. We are unique in Orange County, and that we're considered the donut hole of California in terms of climate action. But never say never, and that's another way to be a model county, is to say, even with a lot of divide and a very purple community, a lot of about renewables just works. it makes sense. And we all want clean air, and we're very challenged in the LA area with not having clean air. And there are lots of really great arguments for doing this, and, you know, for our communities. So, and our diverse community in Orange County, we do have areas there that are low income and need a different kind of help. And we have the other side, the coastal communities, where there's a lot of money, but there's also a lot of risk and flooding. And so we just have, you know, an opportunity here to make this work in the county.
So we do have one last activity, but I know that there's 2 hands. So maybe we'll do the 2 questions, then we'll go into the last one. So Tim.
Great, thank you, Selena and Sona. One quick question for transportation, since I noticed like there are lots of words pop up on the screen just now related to transportation. I'm wondering, like, in the city of Irvine, do we have any plan more specifically related to transportation decarbonization? Since I know, like, one of the EV maker, Reinvent, is headquartered in Irvine, and probably we already worked on lots of EV infrastructure projects, but want to know more about maybe any other project we are considering, or even maybe some partnership with some of the EV maker like Reinvent or some other players.
Yeah, I think Irvine is kind of becoming a hotbed, right, for EV manufacturers and battery manufacturers that are starting to set their headquarters here. So the Rivian and Karma, and even the larger car manufacturers, some of their EV designs are here. So that's an interesting thing to see that's coming for this region. In Irvine specifically, we've developed a zero emission vehicle transition strategy, and Celine can talk about what we've put together for that, looking internally for our city fleet, but then also externally for community infrastructure and resources that are needed to help this transition to zero emission vehicles. So considering, you know, both what we need for electric infrastructure, what's coming down the line for hydrogen vehicles, and where can we site these resources to really put it in the places where electric vehicle charging might not be easy. So if we have multifamily units, you know, homes that don't have, apartment buildings that don't have electric vehicle infrastructure, can we site that infrastructure in a community center that's close by? In the Great Park, for example, we're going to have, I think, literally hundreds of EV charging stations come online over in the Great Park as that site develops, and looking to see where we can, where we can make the resources available so that the community can be ready for that transition. And I think that ultimately will help us on the transportation side. But all of these things take time again, right? So it's not a quick fix. Some things may be a little bit easier to start with, but they will all take a little bit of time.
Great.
That's another thing about community choice. It attracts clean tech business, because these smaller community choice agencies tend to be able to work with businesses in unique ways. So just a lot of opportunity. We got to make it work in Orange County.
Yeah.
Okay, Huyen.
I kind of debated, but I finally decided I'm just going to say this one word: plastic. I knew Sona before she came to Irvine. I was so excited. Sona from Manhattan Beach was coming to Irvine. So she was a no-name plastics, the plastic fight. So I want to make a quick note that EVs won't save us, because the microplastic from the tire wear kills fish, you know, goes into this major sourcing of microplastics in the waterways, kills fish, and any kind of plastic in general is not good for biodiversity. Biodiversity would help carbon sequestration. So I hope you guys can still go to the city of Irvine, ask for plastic bans. Thank you.
Thanks, Owen. I know plastics are a pet peeve for probably many of us on this call, and plastic pollution is a big challenge. And it, you know, everything is interconnected. So plastics and production of all based on fossil fuel based resources. So it's you know, all of our problems are interconnected, and ideally we can have more solutions to help us wean ourselves off of plastic.
Yeah. Two things that will help that and help scale that is to support your local active transportation groups. I know in Costa Mesa's, ours is Costa Mesa Alliance for Better Streets. Santa Ana Safe Streets, and then also support your California Green Business Program, because both of those programs help businesses to eliminate plastic, and the active transportation is all about walking and biking, and the stronger those programs are, the more they're communicating the benefits of getting out of our cars. So those are two really important organizations to support.
Definitely. Thank you all so much for the comments, and I'm glad those word bubbles kind of inspired us to think about all of these things. And I know you all are thinking about them already, so thank you so much for your feedback. And I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to go over this new community forum that we put together and survey, which I hope all of you will hopefully carve out a little bit of time to participate in, and then share as much as you possibly can. It's a public link. But I'll leave it to Lauren to pull it up, and she's just going to explain how to use the platform, how to give your feedback, and some next steps.
Yeah, thank you, Celine. So I do want to be mindful that we are at the hour. So I just want to reiterate that this presentation is being recorded, and the gist of what I'm saying here will be sent to you in an email after this meeting. But I just want to shortly go over the kind of next part of your feedback, which will take place on this community forum / survey that I have pulled up here. Celine, I believe, will drop the link in the chat, and the link will, as I said, also be sent out to you after the meeting. So this forum provides you with the opportunity to provide input on each preliminary potential measure to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Irvine for our climate action and adaptation plan. The measures are split into 3 categories: transportation, building, energy, wastewater, and other. Once you create an account, which should only take a second, you can browse the tabs and click on a measure to indicate its priority level using this scale. And you can also submit a written comment using this pros and cons feature for each individual measure. And if you have an idea for a strategy that isn't included here in this list, you can add it in at the bottom of each page. And I want to highlight that these measures are definitely not set in stone. They're just essentially a selection of best practices in decarbonization that we plan to narrow down as the city develops the CAAP and as we receive more stakeholder input. And we want the CAAP measures to reflect the needs and priority of the community as much as possible. So please go through each carefully and think about what really is high and low priority. And you'll have these resources linked here to reference as you respond to the measures on the survey. As I said, the slides will be sent to you after this presentation to reference as well. And I believe our email has already been dropped in the chat, but you can contact environmental programs at cityofirvine.org if you have any additional questions about the measures. If you have questions about the forum structure now, we can definitely answer them. Otherwise, we are very excited to see your feedback. You're actually the first group to access this forum. We're just launching it right now. So we're really looking forward to actually seeing some opinions here. I would also like to note that we're working on getting the forum link uploaded to our city website, but this is a public forum and is right now. So please feel free to share with your friends, family, coworkers, peers, anyone you know who lives and works in Irvine. We want to get feedback from as many people as possible. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And thank you all so much. As I said, let us know if there's any questions about that forum or anything else we discussed tonight. Otherwise, I'm just going to turn it back over to Celine, Sona, and Linda to wrap up.
I'd like to get a picture before more people leave. If you're willing, and you'll turn on your camera, I'll just do a quick screenshot right now. Everybody can do that, and just take a minute to smile. And if you don't want to, that's okay. You can just leave it without. Okay, everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. Right. And that's going to make a little noise. I'm going to do one more. So I think we have too many of us for one thing. Okay, let me just go. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right. Okay. We're gonna stay on a little bit longer. But Sona, did you want to wrap up with anything? And then we can, and then anyone that wants to stay, we're just going to talk a little bit about our committees and how you can join and be involved and help us to keep growing and keep spreading the news in Orange County.
Yes, no, thank you all. Keep fighting the good fight. We really do appreciate all that you're doing and all your feedback and input here. And keep following along on our progress as well. And if you do need anything, reach out to us, and or if you need to contact Linda to get a hold of us. But we're pretty easy to find here in Irvine, and we're happy to help out too. And again, wanting to thank our other city partners too. And council member, I think Rhonda's still here. Thank you for joining us. And we're happy to share with Huntington Beach too. I live in Long Beach, so we're just about neighbors. Happy to see what we could do for the other communities. Again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful night, and thank you. Be in touch.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for reaching out to us. That's another thing I find. There are cities and that say, hey, we need help with this, we need help with outreach or whatever. And it is wonderful to have that, instead of having to beg for time.
Plug. Yes, and one last plug, as I mentioned before, if any of you are part of other groups that you think would benefit from a presentation and a feedback session like this, please email the email that I put in the chat, because we're happy to take the show on the road. So thank you all so much.
Great. So we're just going to continue on here a little bit more. You're free to stay or go. I want to give you that chance because I know we're over time a little bit, and we probably will only take about 15 more minutes. But we do have some things coming up and some things that are really important in it. And there might be a few people on the call that want to share some actions too. So I want to go ahead and do that. I don't see any. I'm just going to, I think, share my screen because we have a slideshow, unless anyone has any comments they want to make before I do that. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go back to our slideshow. And this is the dedication I just did. And there's our, so I'm just going to mention this, and I'm going to hand it over to a couple of our other team members. But we have chapter elections coming up that we're required to do every year. We get some rules from national and the national chapter. And so if you're interested in helping out, we will create a position for you if there's something that really matters to you, like green businesses or anything. But we also will have all our positions open, and we do a small election. And then there's a training. I just got this on our regional call this morning. Al Gore is going to do an online training, and don't miss it if you get the opportunity. It's free. It'll change your life. It's an amazing education. It's full of the latest science, and even if you work 9 to 5, they're going to make it so you can, they have a nighttime one, and it was 2 or 3 days for us total. It's well worth doing. So, that'll be coming up. And then we have, like I mentioned, lots of volunteer opportunities, just single events or things you can do. So make sure you get on our mailing list, because we'll be telling you we need help with tabling, or we need help in our cities, or there's a climate strike, and all kinds of ways you can help. Earth Day, every year we do something. And then speaking of climate strikes, Greta Thunberg's climate strike is coming up, Fridays for Future. It happens several times a year, March 3rd, and our local organizer of Fridays for Future Orange County and Reform and Sustain are helping plan that. And I think we have someone from Reform and Sustain here. If you want to put anything in the chat or say anything, Ari, about how people can get involved, please do that. And I lead a monthly community choice action team. I've been doing it since 2017. I've been involved in community choice, and was one of the founding members of OC Clean Power, and there's still a lot of work to be done, and I try to stay in touch and get as much information as I can. I've been to several of the statewide trainings with all the community choice agencies. I have contacts all over the state, and I try to stay in touch with the latest and what would be helpful here in Orange County. So that's the first Thursday, and we're trying 7 p.m. We keep changing the times because, but this is our next one will be February 2nd. Please email me or email a Climate Reality Project OC if you want to be notified about that. And now Tristan is going to talk about our communications team.
Hi, everyone. We would love people to get involved in our communications and outreach committee. And we produce a podcast about stories that can change our world. And we talk everything about youth action to what the UN is doing to agriculture. We also put on a number of webinars throughout the year. And one of the programs that I also work with our youth action team and our climate literacy, climate in the classroom, so important to have that and support that. And also our website, we're looking for people to write blogs and help us keep that updated. And as well as doing outreach on the cool events that we do for Earth Day and the OC Sustainability Fair. So we hope you think about joining us. We have a great time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tristan. And yeah, if you have a specific skill, web development or MailChimp or Facebook or creating flyers, we can always use that kind of help. So then Jocelyn, do you want to talk a little bit about the Sustainable Living Committee?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So the Sustainable Living Committee is a wonderful group of folks who are learning how to live more sustainably and promote sustainable living. We work with local businesses and restaurants to encourage them to go more sustainable with their practices. For eliminating plastic is the biggest one. So we also meet socially in restaurants that are going sustainable, like Vegged in Costa Mesa, where we met the last time. And we helped to put on the Sustainable Living Fair. And the last time it was in Brea in May, which was a lot of fun.
So if you're interested, please join. It is a lot of fun, and there's lots to do. Hoyen, I know you're very involved, and so please, take their emails, because as stuff comes up, just even educating us on some of the stuff that's coming up with 1383 and would be very helpful. Okay. Lisa's not here, but our policy chair, that is an understated job. She meets with the California Coalition, and we decide every year on a priority bills, and we sign on to lots of letters, and some are national, some are local, like to LA area or something, or we just signed one for Riverside, declaring it a health emergency there because of the smog levels. And then we do state signings. So we need more policy people and more help there. So you can contact Lisa if you're interested in that, or if there's a particular bill or policy that you think is important for us to follow. We would really appreciate you reaching out to us. And then this is our help needed. These are just all the things that we always can use more help with. If you're really environmental justice, the national chapter has wonderful education and things going on in that area. And so if somebody just wanted to be involved in that committee, we have local environmental justice and we have national. There's lots of important things going on in that area. As we're having more climate crisis, even the refugee problem and people being displaced is a huge issue. And then just somebody to send out welcome emails when we've had that in the past, that's really helped. And, you know, you can see just the various things here. Danny's our t-shirt fundraiser. So the email's at the bottom if you want to get more involved or you have an idea for us. And then I'm not even sure if this link is so good. Danny, do you want to say anything about t-shirt sales?
This link, I think, is still good.
Oh, good.
Anyway, I want you to notice how great this t-shirt goes with the sign. You need to get your own t-shirt.
Sorry.
And your own sign.
Oh, goodness. I'm sorry.
Okay, t-shirts, we asked for a donation of $25. And if you want me to mail it, then we have to charge for that too. But they're a great shirt. And if you don't have one, you got to get one.
I don't know what happened, but we lost our, I don't know why I cannot from the current slide. There we go. Okay. So we will put that in the chat in a minute. This is all our contact information, how to join our Facebook, Climate Reality Orange County, Instagram, and we're on Twitter at Climate OC. But check out our webpage because there's an amazing amount of resources on there and blog. We write blogs. And so that is it. And I'm going to stop sharing and ask if anybody has any comments or questions.